Hey everybody, welcome to the Purpose People podcast. I have Dr. Chris Baker in the house. He is an author. He advises schools at quite a high level, and so we're going to just talk about his journey in how to influence the next generation. So does that sound good?
Amazing. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah.
No, thank you. So obviously we've all been at school, okay? Some of us have great experience at school, some have not so great experience. What was your journey of school? Did you enjoy school? Did you come out of it with loads of scars?
Yeah.
Because you went back into education, which often people can't get as far away from it as possible.
Yeah.
So what was your journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And my reflections on my time at school have changed since I was an adult. So I thought that, I love school, but I loved it because I was so into sport.
Right.
And I also thought that I was quite good at school because I did loads of sport.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel unconfident or anything like that. I was quite popular.
What was your sport? What was your...
Well, it was football at the time.
Yeah.
But it was just this general kind of... I had a pretty easy ride, because I was, nice, polite, sporty, popular, all those sorts of things.
What team do you support?
Wow, this is the thing. I don't actually support any Bristol teams anymore because, I always had this dream that one of them would make it into the Premiership so I could get like a Panini football album, but he never did. So I just kind of left that to the side. And then as I became an adult, got more into kind of fitness and stuff like that. But the school thing is fascinating because I didn't realise that I was drastically underconfident as a kid. I went through school thinking I was confident, but what was underlying was a confidence only in the things that I liked to do. Yeah. So interestingly, I kind of stayed away from things that I wasn't confident in, like academics and all those things. Yeah. And so, I had a really cushy, great family, lived close to my school. I didn't realize it was a pretty tough school when I was there.
It's an interesting one you say that because, I think when you get older, obviously, the measure of growth is that being uncomfortable. And it's almost like we're not really challenged. It's like you grow up trying to make your life as comfortable as possible. Yeah. And then you get older and you realize the ones that grow are the ones that make themselves the most uncomfortable.
It's scary. And I mean, lots of people who, would, and yourself, I'm sure, could highlight a single teacher maybe that's made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had a guy called Mr. Money. He was the...
Mr. Money?
Mr. Money, yeah.
Always on the money.
Colin Money, his name was. And he's still around. And it was the first person who challenged me and believed in me at the same time. And so I got to kind of A-levels, and that was it. I wasn't academics, I wasn't going to do it. I wanted to go and be a gas man, like a gas engineer. Yeah. Well, my dad fixed TVs when I was a kid, so I thought, fixing things makes you useful. I don't want to be my dad, so maybe I'll be a gas man. And he was the first one that said, no, you're not, you're going to do A-levels. And I thought, no, I can't do that. I'm going to go and do something, And he forced me to do it. And that was the first kind of, I guess, pivot in my life. He then went on to be the same when I got to degree, when he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm going to go and, be a fitness instructor somewhere. He said, no, you're not, you're going to university. And I said, no, I can't do that. So this guy, pretty much, again, added the challenge in at the exact points when I needed it. Yeah,
because I think that's it. If you want someone to go further, faster and higher, then it's not necessarily the same journey that you're going to go on. And I think what I like about that is that it was like building upon his shoulders rather than starting again and working in parallel. Yeah. But in essence, not only he wasn't necessarily fixing you, but he was obviously putting the tools in place to make sure that you wouldn't be where he was to take you further, because he had lived his life. And I think as you get older, you look at your career and you go, oh, maybe I should have gone that way or should have gone this way. And so when you have your kids and they get older, you're like, well, how can I save them 10 years in the wilderness, so to speak?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's interesting you say that, because I've got some of my own children now, and I'm actively pushing them into sort of situations where they feel a bit uncomfortable. Like my son's very sporty, and I'm constantly pushing him into academics to make sure that that's a bit balanced. Yeah. That he's got as much confidence in academics as he is in sports, and he doesn't have that kind of void that I had. That meant I actually went in one direction for almost everything, because I went on to do a sports degree at university, not knowing that I just kept making choices to do with sport
Yeah.
because I didn't feel confident in anything else, you know. And it's maybe a bit of a regret. I mean, I've loved my career and stuff, but even after the degree, I sort of then chose to be a PE teacher because it was easy.
Yeah,
You know, and I remember vividly at the end of the third year of university, people having choices like, oh, I'm going to go and do physiotherapy or nutrition or sports psychology.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it at the time, but I wasn't doing that because it meant another qualification in academics. And, you know, so that was a bit of a shame, really.
So obviously, but that journey is not uncommon, particularly with guys. You know, they're quite good at sport, and then it's like, well, what do you want to be? And ultimately, the destination often is a PE teacher. Yeah. And at what point do you think in that journey where you needed to be sat down and someone said, how about doing something else?
Yeah.
How old would you think that would be? Because I don't think we ask those questions early enough at all.
I don't think we do.
We ask them like right at the end of their whole thing, and I generally think they need to be asked earlier.
I think you're right. I think it's timely. My daughter's 14 this week, and she's just about to take her like year 10 options.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first point at which, I mean, you could start as early as you want, but that decision of what are you going to focus on now, I think would have been the time for me for someone to say, oh, you know, you don't have to do everything to do with sport. What about this? What about that?
I mean, just when you were doing sport, did you have thoughts of trying to make it professionally in sport or not?
Well, yeah, I don't think I was good enough, interestingly.
Yeah, but at the time you might not have thought.
I might have thought,
you thought you were good enough, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think strangely, I think I knew quite early that it wasn't going to be a professional thing, but I think I just wanted to, you know, I thought I could work in, you know, a sports environment or things like that. Yeah. I mean, one of the most fascinating things, and again, this guy, Colin Money, he, when I was in sort of at the end of post-16, you know, sixth form, said, oh, you should go and do a summer camp, you know, in America.
Yep.
And I was like, what's that? You know, and sort of you read into it a little bit and you go across and you work in sports and, you know, you do whatever, you know, there's an arts camp or a water sports camp or something like that. And I signed up and I thought, yeah, great, you know, I'm going to get like a water sports camp in America, you know, LA or somewhere like that.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Sounds great, you know. Yeah. And unashamedly at that age, I was like, you know, there'll be girls, there'll be all kinds of stuff. And the way it works is you kind of apply and you say what your skill set is, and they match you with a camp.
Was that Camp America?
Yeah.
Because I applied to it and I got in and I was all ready to go. And then circumstances, situations, I decided to stay. I look back now, that was a pretty dumb move. It's like,
well, I ended up getting an all-boys science camp in Pennsylvania. It couldn't be more different than what I wanted. And but it absolutely changed my life. If I think about kind of pivot points, that was where I think, like, you know, Chris version 2 was created, really. Because suddenly, I've got another book coming out in the summer where I talk about this, in that my confidence, I think, up to that point was governed by my social circle.
Yeah, that's I think that's probably that's an under talked about thing. But and it, you know, people say, well, you know, you don't want to keep changing your circle of friends because that's a bit ruthless or whatever. But to some degree, I think you can still be friends with them, but they shouldn't be your key influencers and decision makers. But often we do make this. And funny enough, that's one of the reasons why I didn't go to Camp America, because a few of my mates are like, oh, maybe you're not. And I think I was dating at the time and that relationship was in it. It's like, do I go? If I go away, you know, it's not, you know. So I was like, oh, I stay. And I look back now and I was like, that was a dumb move. But... and I think, well, my life been like, I'm glad where it is now. Maybe I would have got there quicker if I'd gone out there. Yeah. But I think it's that ability to essentially flee the nest, you know, break out of that circle.
Yeah.
You know, I think eventually, if you're listening to your heart, you'll do it anyway. I think you will get to that point. It's just how long it takes.
It does, yeah. And because, of course, what I didn't realize was, you know, where I grew up, and the groups of friends I had, I was only exposed to their aspirations.
Yeah.
I was never exposed to anybody with higher aspirations than the group I was in, parents, all those things.
Yeah.
And so suddenly I was exposed to people who, you know, lived in different countries. They wanted to be doctors and lawyers and all these things. And at the same time as I hear them having high aspirations, I was also thinking, but you're not that much different to me.
Yeah.
So if we're the same, but you've got higher aspiration, maybe I could have one. And one of the funniest things I tell people, I tell my kids, anybody who will listen really about this, is that at the end of the first year at summer camp, I was like, wow, that was me going outside of my kind of circle. And a few of the guys on camp were like, oh, do you want to come traveling with us? I said, oh, no, I'm going back to my mum. You know, I'm going back, you know. They said, no, we're going to, this is in Pennsylvania, they said, we're going to Miami. You know, we're just going to go and hang out on the beaches. And I was like, how you getting to Miami? We're just going to go to the train station and just get a train. I was like, wow. And I remember thinking, you just lean into this, Chris, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
And so I went with them to the train station, Amtrak train station in New York, and literally kind of just followed the crowd to the point where suddenly I was then on a train to Miami. And that then led to 6 years of traveling.
And that's incredible, isn't it? Because you've leaned into that, but that principle then is to recognize that. And I'm guessing you just kept leaning into it.
After that, I was just kind of, I remember getting on the train and going, oh, that wasn't that difficult.
Isn't it weird, eh?
It's crazy. And that was the end.
And it can be as simple as buying a ticket and sitting on a plane. I use this as an example. So, you know, during the pandemic, we connected with a lot of Americans because there's a load of stuff online and whatever. And then we were filming a podcast. Nathan, who looks after our 3D arm, he's not here today, but he challenged me and said, oh, when are you going to America? Yeah. And I was like, oh, you're right. When am I going? So I just booked the ticket. Yeah. So I've booked a ticket, and now I seem to be going back there more and more. Yeah. But it's just that small action. And yet we put so many things in the way. Oh, I can't do that because of this, that, and the other. Yeah. And actually just book the ticket and sit on the plane. Yeah. And see where it takes you.
That was crazy.
Yeah, awesome, man.
It was really great. And of course, I did...
So in 6 years then, so obviously you're traveling 6 years. What were you thinking career-wise at that time?
Yeah, I didn't really have any thoughts. I mean, I just had this kind of crazy life where me and the guys from summer camp would just travel around the world and then do camp again. And then use the money and travel around and use the money. And we just kept bumming around the world, just kind of staying in people's houses. And, you know, and when I talk to my kids now, and when I think actually now as an adult, how I'm quite nervous and I've kind of almost regressed a little bit, because I was like solo trekking through the Amazon and like in Bolivia and, you know, and all kinds of crazy places.
For treasure,
all that sort of stuff.
The Bristolian, you know, Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was
Dr. Jones.
I wind my mum up a bit with this because while I was traveling, I developed this, you know, super intercontinental accent. You know, I was a little bit of American, Australian, all this sort of thing. I thought this is going to be great when I get home. Yeah. And then literally like a week or two with my mum, and I was like, and I was like, God damn it! I must have spent about 20 grand on that accent, and I was gone.
So you're traveling around. You got the freedom, and I guess you're learning lots of different things, different cultures, different people, different outlooks, and obviously, if you're in the States, I mean, one state wildly varies from the next one as well. Yeah. So I would guess there's that underlying thing within you to learn. Yeah. I mean, there's that quest for knowledge. Would that be a fair thing?
I think so. I think once you get, it's a bit like you said. We typically repeat the behaviours that give us what we want. You know, that we're rewarded for. That's kind of like basic motivation, isn't it? Like if you do something and it produces a good result, then you're more likely to do it again. Yeah. And I think, you know, that's what came with the travelling. But I remember. You know, and I wasn't a huge reader because, of course, I would academically, you know, low confidence, didn't really see the point of, you know, books and all that sort of business. And it wasn't until, and I brought a couple with me just because they're funny. Two key things happened while I was traveling, and two key books that I think I still talk about now that kind of changed my life. The first one I found actually in the Bolivian jungle. It's one of those weird things where, you know, most hostels, they have like a book exchange. Yeah. Do you know? And I was, at the time, do you remember when all the Dan Brown, you know, like Da Vinci Code and all that stuff was kicking around? I had that, and it was like hot property, and I thought, oh, I'll exchange it. And so I went to this, the book bit in the hostel, and I couldn't see a single, like, nothing even in English, really.
Yeah.
So I'm searching through these books thinking, gotta exchange it for something. And it ended up, the book that I picked was the Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious because I remember flicking through it and thinking, there's not a lot of pictures. The writing's really small. This doesn't feel like my sort of book. But hey, I had a very limited choice and read it and loved it. And I think it was the first time that I kind of saw this idea of, well, mate, there are rules. There are things you could live by.
Yeah.
Almost like a structure.
Yeah.
So I think I felt, to use the podcast, a little bit lacking of purpose.
Yeah.
Up until that point, no structure, no guidance, no goals.
Just going with the flow.
Just going with the flow, going where things took me, and then reading that book, thinking, right, okay, so if I begin with the end in mind, think win-win, all these different things. Oh, this is interesting, and after that, it unlocked all kinds of stuff for me in terms of thinking.
And I think that going back to school in a sense, when I started reading, so like one of the ones I joked with Ollie about, to be fair, but he had never heard of John Maxwell.
Right.
And if you're into leadership, I'm like,
of
how
course,
the heck did you not hear of John Maxwell? Anyway, but when I started reading his books, it was just like, why is this stuff not taught?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And I was just like, you've been telling me about pi 3.14
Yeah.
and actually I can apply this now and change the course of where I'm heading.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, and obviously pi's got its place, I guess.
Of course.
But the point is, it was like these were tools I could apply now and see a tangible result. Leadership is influence, and they're going, okay, so how do you influence? And there's all these points and steps. All of a sudden, it was like, I've got all these tools that I never had before that I still use today, and whatever else. It's like my son, I gave him the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and he started reading it, and he's like, ooh, and I think. But this sort of stuff isn't taught, and I think as educators like yourself and us to some extent with what we're doing at Humans, is trying to get this to our kids so much earlier, because I still believe that there are big gaps in the educational system. It's almost like it hasn't been reinvented, and it needs to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because once I'd finished all the traveling and kind of thought, well, I'd probably grow up and get a job, sort of thing.
How old were you then?
25 maybe. So
fair enough.
Yeah. And I got a job as a PE teacher at a school in Bristol called John Cabot Academy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't immediate, but there was a time where the head at that time was David Carter, and he went on then to be Sir David Carter and the National Schools Commissioner and all these kind of things. He said to me once, he said, Chris, I've got this group of year 11s. They're a bit, tricky. Can you do something with them? And I thought, okay. And it just came straight back to me, 7 habits. And so I ended up creating like a almost sort of PSHE style course for them. 7 habits of highly effective teenagers or students. I can't remember what I called it now.
Monsters.
And we just basically went through it. And again, to see the level of engagement, and I think you're right, there's that idea of, look, these core principles this guy has found, across all highly successful people. And the book sold, I can't remember, I don't know if it's on this one, 10 million copies.
Well, this is the thing. It's like you talked about PGSE, SE and whatever. It was like what I felt when we were educated was that we're going to speak to you, we're going to speak at you, we're going to broadcast you stuff that are facts and figures, but there's no tangible action to it. Whereas a book like that, I read it and I go, I get it, I understand it, I can apply it. And that's where I think, 10 million copies, 10 million's not enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You think about America, 350 million people, 68 million people in the UK. Everyone needs to read that book.
They do.
But it's not on the curriculum.
No.
Even now, you look at that, and then you've got like Brian Tracy, Eat That Frog. You've got things, these fundamental books that should be in part of the curriculum. But they, they're not signed up to our this, that, and the other. But the point is, these are life-changing books that are genuinely life-changing.
Yeah.
And it, like you've got a load of kids together, you've given them those tools, and I hazard the guess, if they even went to university, that's probably still the best education they've had.
Yeah. Because because it's fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah.
Start with the end in mind. Just like come on.
And we hear it said, don't we?
Yeah.
We don't know where it's from,
No,
and it's like, well, no, here it is. Here's the book.
Yeah.
Read the rest of it.
It's funny. It is really scary.
So you get to 25, and you're like going, right, okay, and you're now influencing these children or whatever, and so. Where did that morph? Because you've gone from a PE teacher and then you're morphing into more leadership and a coach. What was the transition period then? What did that look like?
Yeah, again, it's that same theme of somebody else almost helping me put myself into challenging situations. And David Carter's another person who literally kind of guided me and almost fueled that.
Yeah.
By creating a space where it was okay to trial things and be innovative and all that stuff, but also giving me enough kind of, I guess, backing to make me feel confident. Well, if Dave thinks I can do it, then
it's brilliant.
I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah.
And so it was just, it was always sort of, our conversations were always kind of him saying, "Oh, I've been thinking about this. Do you fancy having a go at that?" And I say, yeah. Again,
wow.
Lean in.
Yeah.
And then, try hard. And then he would then praise me and it would go well, which would create that kind of cycle, the spiral up of me going, well, I'm going to lean in again. And you're going to lean in further and higher.
Which is amazing, because I think that's the point, is you recognize that pattern from, you're traveling and I see the doors that open and you just keep leaning in. And as you keep leaning in, you just keep getting more and more knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't lean in. They resist it. They resist change at any cost. Yeah. And I think, like with yourself, if you said yourself when you were running around the world, would you become a doctor, for example, you probably went, nah.
No.
Yeah, that constant leaning in eventually takes you to where you need to get to. So he was quite a big influence in your life then.
Massive, and just to have somebody who believes in you and gives you opportunities. But also, he's an interesting one is that he didn't allow me to keep making sideways moves. Do you know what I mean? There was always a little bit of extra challenge with everything that he asked me to do. And I spoke to him lots of times since.
You talk about habit stacking. It's more like challenge stacking.
There you go.
Similar, there you go. Isn't it? Challenge stacking.
I like that, yeah.
We have that one.
We'll steal that, yeah. There'll be a launch pad on that.
Yeah, but challenge stacking, like how can you move the dial a little bit more? You're already challenged, but how can we just push it that little bit more?
I was talking to someone this morning actually about that idea of flow state.
Yep.
And that there is a sweet spot in there, because a challenge too hard potentially has a negative impact.
Yeah, it can demotivate, 100%.
It's almost that kind of not too, Goldilocks almost, isn't it? Not too easy, not too hard, just sort of sweet in the middle. Here's one for you, maybe Goldilocks goal. A Goldilocks goal.
A Goldilocks goal. I mean, I think for me, it's one of those things where growth is ultimately the ultimate aim. And I think for me, you can see someone that they adopt it, they pick it, they move forward. And I think that's what happened in your life, that someone could see it, that you adopted it and you moved up. And I think it's when you're struggling to move up, then they go, oh, hang on a minute, maybe we need to dial it down a bit. But there's also that element of people seeing in you what you can't see.
Yeah, that's
and believing in you.
Yeah.
And then pushing you, because if it was down to you, you might go, no, I'm all right, thanks. But they're like, no, they keep pushing you along. And I think that is a thing. It's like even as a father, for example, with your kids, it's like, just push them a little bit harder, just push them. And that's a bit cruel. No, it's not about being cruel. I want them to grow.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because of course people would assume that I've been on, that I've always got the confidence to then take it.
Yeah.
But I was unconfident the whole way.
Yeah, that's it.
It was someone else's confidence that gave me the confidence to start the project.
Yeah.
But I still was underconfident doing the project.
Yeah, of course. You're uncomfortable, right?
Exactly. That's probably a better word. Yeah, uncomfortable rather than unconfident.
I think confidence comes from being asked to do the same task again because
Yeah.
you've done it once. You go, well, I could probably do it again.
Yeah.
But I think it's being uncomfortable in that place where you're like, and it's also timing, because you always think the timing's got to be perfect, and it never is.
No.
You're never ready.
No.
Ever for any.
No.
If you're doing growth, you're never ready for it.
No.
It's always been in that place.
That's interesting, isn't it?
You know, I've got to have all this in place and that in place. You're never ready. It's
No.
like with kids, you know, I'm going to have kids and mother. You're never ready.
No.
It's just do it, and
Yeah.
and you grow to that role. I think over time.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I remember someone said, "What was it? If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough."
Yeah,
You
100%.
know, like if you don't feel a little bit anxious about it, you probably haven't nudged it high enough.
But it's funny because we're talking about, like, if you look at a lot of the photos where you've done something, like you look back and you go, particularly let's say LinkedIn, you look back and you spoke on the stage at X.
Yeah.
We see the result, but it's always good for us to go, what did we feel like at that 10 minutes before? Everything in us was saying, don't get on that stage, you're not good enough, and everyone's going to hate what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Then you go and deliver it, and everyone's blown away by what you're doing and love it and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, just always remember that 10 minutes before the event, because you'll be back there again.
Yeah.
So if someone sees you there, oh, can you go and speak at this place? And you'll go through the same, I don't know, and yet you go for it. And I think that's your willingness to lean in, regardless if it's comfortable or not, is the place of growth.
Yeah.
You know, I remember we got asked Humans, we got asked to speak at the De Vere hotels, you know, and we've been trying to get in contact with them for a while, and eventually we got the opportunity to go and speak there. And, you know, I didn't know what to expect. You know, went and delivered and come out. And then I went back there again to meet somebody else. And it was really funny because the way the day was structured, I didn't have any chance for any feedback. So I was
Right.
you know, how did it go? I got a message saying, thanks very much, it was great.
Yeah.
And then a couple of people walk in and go, oh, you're here back. Oh, thanks so much. We loved it, whatever else. And it's like, but I remember the lead up going, I don't know what to expect. You know, because you're going, will it go down well? Will it not go down well? Because you think that. But one thing I'd say in that is that I don't want to ever lose that.
No.
Because it keeps you humble.
Yeah.
Because if I feel that I get into where I'm not questioning myself or I'm not going to reflect, I don't care enough.
No.
And so for me, that's, even though I look at those pictures, I always remember the 10 minutes before. I'm glad I've got that because I still want that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But growth is being uncomfortable.
Well, I think that's fascinating. And we talk about something called hyper self-efficacy, so hyper confidence maybe, or hubris.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place to be, because you then don't prep as hard.
Yeah.
You don't, all those sorts of things. And so I think you're right. Yeah, that sweet spot of slightly uncomfortable probably means that you prep better and you probably perform better.
So obviously, you said in the beginning, you're sports, you're doing these things, and then you've obviously then educating people maybe a bit beyond what a PE teacher would be known for. And then what about the journey to doctor? I mean, how did that become on the agenda?
I think, it's probably it comes from the sports, I think, just that kind of desire for challenge, desire to be better, desire to win. And I think that at times it's become unhealthy for me.
Yeah.
I tend to wake up looking for challenges, and feel like I'm in competition with everybody. I'd semi-joke about I'm constantly, even at 47, still trying to escape my 16-year-old unconfident self. Do you know what I mean? I'm still trying to find something that, eclipses my poor GCSEs and my poor A-levels and all that. And so basically when it came to it, I've just been that kind of almost like a challenge junkie, just trying to find anything that's outside of my circle that I could try and have a go at to then, boost my confidence. And so the doctorate came around about almost reflecting on, we were talking earlier about, at that point, I'd kind of done all of the sporting stuff that I thought I could possibly do.
Yeah.
So I was joking earlier that at one point I couldn't swim kind of front crawl. And why, as an adult, that's not a problem. Who cares? You go swim with your kids, you don't really swim. You can breaststroke,
Trying to rescue them.
If you try to rescue someone, you could probably fudge it.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine's, we were talking about physical challenges, and he then said there was this thing called the Ironman triathlon. And I was like, what is it? And he said it's basically the hardest one-day event you can do. I mean, people stack them now, which is crazy. well, you know, what is it? Oh, it's a swim first, then a cycle, and then a run. I was like, well, I can't swim, so that's out. And then you start thinking, well, maybe this and that. And so I ended up doing a couple of Ironman triathlons to try, and so that was that. And I thought, all right, well, you smashed the sports stuff. What's the hardest academic thing you could do?
Oh wow, okay.
Because the way that self-efficacy works, which is what we'll talk about later and what the doctorate's in, is this idea that it's called task-specific confidence.
Yep.
So you wouldn't, you can call yourself a confident person, but self-efficacy is very task-specific. So you might be a confident, I don't know, presenter, but not a confident academic. And then it gets even more crazy in that you could be, I'm a very confident presenter in front of teachers and leaders. But if you watch me in front of a bunch of academics, I'm a different person.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's outside of my thing. And so basically I then just dreamt up.
It's because you're 16 in that environment.
It is because
in your head you're 16.
I'm
in
still
that
like,
environment.
but they're super clever.
Yeah.
You know,
so there's that gap. So because you were 16 when you thought you weren't quite, up to scratch.
Yeah.
In that environment, you're still there.
I'm still there.
But in other environments, you've gone on.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm all right.
Exactly.
I can live in this sector.
And so basically the doctorate was like, what's the hardest thing I can try? And it was, well, a doctorate's the highest thing you can do. Right, sign me up. And I felt really uncomfortable and unconfident almost the whole way through. And
so how long did it take to achieve
I did
that?
it part-time, so it took me 4.5 years, which
Okay.
is effectively the shortest you can do it. I mean, my wife was putting a bit of financial pressure on me every year, sort of, we can't keep shelling out this money. And interestingly, again, to go back to that idea of almost ignition points or things, I remember vividly being in the beginning of the course, and it was like a taught thing where you go to seminars and stuff like that. And I felt like a fish out of water, and I felt like I was 16 again because the room was full of what I would call academics who were then doing their doctorate.
Yeah.
And they were saying words I'd never heard of, and I was just being quiet, really. And anytime there was a discussion, there's no way I'd put my hand up. Right. I was way too vulnerable to sort of say, just in case I said something dumb.
Yeah.
I would want to just run out if they went, what are you talking about? And I remember, again, thinking I had something to say and I could feel it like right up by my throat, and I thought, so I just said it. And then one of the guys who I thought in my mind was the most academic, he said, that is, oh my God, Chris, that is exactly what it is. That is one of the most, and he basically just bigged me up from what I said.
Yeah.
And that was it. I was like 10 feet tall after that. And so I just kept putting my hand up after that.
But what I find with that is as well is that in that academic world, because you're not academic, you do have a slightly different thought process in the way that you'd see things.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I use the example the way I'm not a coder, but I understand code.
Right.
So when I've got a coder who's got a problem, I'll approach it from a completely different way.
Absolutely.
And go, but if it's this, and surely it's like this, it's a bit like, and I use an analogy, it's a bit like Lego, isn't it? So surely if you plug that in and plug that in, and that bit's missing, we need to fix that bit. And oh, that's a good point. And it's just having that ability sometimes, and I think to be, as you said, slightly outside, that actually helps.
Yeah.
And what's his name? Matthew Syed.
Yeah.
And he talks about Rebel Ideas, the book, and collective intelligence. And the collective intelligence aspect is having people that aren't in that sector makes you richer.
Yeah.
And I think in that environment you're talking about there is, we've got a lot of academics, but you've got someone who sits outside of academia that makes that group stronger.
Absolutely.
And it's learning to celebrate that. And I think in the past, everyone's got to be this, so we might be. But what Matthew Syed makes a point very, very strongly is that collective intelligence is having diverse thinking that allows you to get rid of the echo chambers and come up with a solution from multiple angles. That yes, the collective then go, it's this, but you can see differently. And I mean, so for me, when someone like yourself comes through that academic world, I champion it and I love it because it's like, it's not that you're anti-academia, you're just saying this is another voice, this is another way of doing life that can empower, educate, and see things that people can't always see.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because now I get invited to academic things because I've got real world experience.
There you go.
So they're holding me higher than them, which is strange for me, for them.
But then you've taken risks.
And one of the launch pads I wrote a while back was spiky leaders, rounded teams. And that idea that, we probably shouldn't be trying to make our leaders good at everything. It's not possible.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be trying to round them off. We should be saying, right, you're spiky there, but he's spiky, she's spiky. If we put you together, we can create a rounded team.
Correct.
And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. Again, going back to a John Maxwell thing, is like where you're weak, find someone strong, because then you're a stronger organisation. And if you're very good at making quick decisions, great, you're going to need one of those people in your team.
Yeah.
But if you've got someone that loves to go through the detail, you're also going to need someone like that as well, so you don't miss anything.
Yeah.
So that goes to, we're not competing, we're completing.
Yeah, nice.
And I think that's the big shift for me, is that as a leader you become secure and say, I'm confident to say I don't know nothing about this, rather than pretend I know everything. I don't know anything about it, so I need you to fill that gap to make that happen. So your book, show us your book.
Well, so this is an interesting one. So this came about. It's called Leadership Launchpads. Effectively, it started off as you'll recognise this idea that you can learn something, but until you do something with that knowledge, it's unlikely to stick, or it's unlikely to kind of evolve. And so I got into this habit of, I read a lot and listen to a lot and go to lots of, so I'm thinking about lots of things. And as I joked about earlier, my past lack of academics constantly catches me up, because people will say words like, I should know what they mean, and I don't know what they mean. Yeah. So I used to just lean into that and go, right, I'm going to find that out. I'd go and Google psychological safety, listen to Amy Edmondson and all that, and I think, that's really interesting. But then I'd put my spin on it. Yeah. And the way I would process that is I'd make an image. So I would just, and I love, I think I'm a frustrated graphic artist or something, really low level, just on PowerPoint. And I would just make an image that crystallized all my thinking and what I'd read about psychological safety. Yeah. And that was fine. And I just did that myself. And then I started putting them on Twitter and LinkedIn and all that things, and people seemed to like them. And then a good friend of mine, again, another person who pushed me out of my comfort zone, said, you should put those in a book. Yeah, I said, no, I can't, no one would read it and all these sorts of things. No, you should do it. And it went off the boil for a little bit, and then I caught up with her again, and she said, have you done it yet? And I said, no, I haven't. And, she kind of coached me into it and said, do it. And so I basically pulled together 100 of these launch pads. Wow. So there's 100 kind of images, and then I created what I called a booster page that goes on the other side, which talks about kind of key takeaways, reflective questions. But the idea behind the launch pad is that it launches you into further thought or further study. Because for me, that's that's where we need to get to, is that people are owning their professional development and almost selecting something they're interested in, and then saying, oh, I've never heard of triune brain theory. What's that? And of course, now we've got this explosion in AI. Yeah. You could just go, teach me about this, will you? Or do you know Paul McLean? Yeah. What did he do? And and so it's for me, I use it tons. I use it in my executive coaching. Yeah. Because effectively, we do this thing called case concept coupling. Mm-hmm. So someone will bring a problem, and they'll say, Chris, let's take an example. I don't think I'd be a very good leader. Why not? I'm a bit shy. I think I'm an introvert. All right. Okay. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then so-and-so's an extrovert, and, and then they'll say something like, sometimes I feel like I'm an introvert or an extrovert. And I say, have you heard, of kind of, the bit in between? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you can be, and so on. And so then I present them with this. We have a look at it, and they go, oh my God, that makes complete sense. And so the book has kind of been really useful, and leadership teams now are kind of buying one for each of their leaders.
It's incredible, yeah.
And then they're having almost like a standing agenda item at SLT meetings, where every SLT meeting they have a launch pad, and, you know, Johnny picks this week's, Jane picks the next one.
It's
and
great.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
It's great. I mean, for me, it's the aspect of leadership is something that there are principles out there, and that, you know, to be constantly be a student of leadership makes you a better leader.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, having those things as launch pads, it's like, it's easy to understand and discuss and then go away and learn it. But the thing is, if you educate a leader with 10 of those principles, they're going to be much better than they were with none. And I think that's a commitment to leadership. You know, you've got these things, you've got active examples, but the difference is that they can apply them, you know, and I think that's what's good for me. You know, as much as I love watching sport and stuff like that, I kind of like finding out behind the scenes and how they became a coach and why they were like this and how they operated. And you know, different coaches have different methods and different methodologies, and, you know, how they motivate the players. And one coach motivates one particular player, and then another one comes in and can't motivate them, or the other way around. He's not quite plugging in, and then they change the manager and they bring him in and he shifts them, and all of a sudden they're a completely different player. I love that science and that effort of the way things work. So I think if you're in sport in any capacity, I think you're going to like leadership anyway, because ultimately it's like, team lives or dies by its results, and there's always a leader, isn't there? But I think for me, a leadership launchpad platform where you can go, here's another principle, here's another principle, is brilliant.
And some of them resonate more than others, and they'll resonate with you at different times. You know, I have some people who kind of, you know, they flick through and then they'll find one that really kind of strikes them. And like we said earlier, we're just trying to create those ignition points. You know, if you're feeling like, I mean, I said do loads of executive coaching now, and people tend to come to me and sort of like, bit meh, bit kind of this, and it's just about helping them find that ignition point that's then going to give them a kind of a launch pad, I suppose, to the next level.
But I do think it doesn't matter whether you've got a £10,000 company, a £100,000 company, a £5 million company. What you find is there's always the same problems. It's about leveling up.
It is.
And it's having the confidence, you said, to level up, to go to that next level. That, weirdly enough, it's always the person. It's not necessarily the money, so to speak. It's like that person's got limited beliefs in a certain area. So how do I dispel those limiting beliefs? You know, and how do we elevate them to feel confident at that level? But at the same time, don't keep them there.
No.
Because I think if you're confident to stay at this level, you begin to die, because ultimately you need to keep learning, you need to keep pushing and keep growing.
We were talking earlier about sort of things that we can do for other people, because of course one of my passions now is being the Mr. Money, the David Carter for other people. You know, wow, what an amazing opportunity for me to be maybe somebody that someone says, you know, Chris helped me. And one of the things we talk about a lot in self-efficacy is this idea of a self-efficacy spiral. So this concept that, you know, our confidence drives our performance, but then our performance either adds or takes away confidence. So it's almost this kind of self, you know, inflating cycle. And I think as leaders, we have to know and notice when people we work with are on a downward spiral or on an upward spiral. And it's fascinating when you look into it about how easy it is to counteract a downward spiral, you know, because all you've got to do is give someone a small win. That's what stops it and then starts an upward. It doesn't have to be massive. It can be the tiniest thing that helps them feel a bit more confident, that then starts them off. And then what you'll find is once you get that cycle going back upwards, it's just, you know, it's almost self-reinforcing, because they'll be a little bit more confident, which means they'll lean a little bit more in, or they'll reach a little bit further out, and then they're successful, and it's just...
Do you, I mean, obviously, because you've played sport, do you think that's, because that not all leaders do, but do you think that's an advantage in the way that you present stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's interesting, actually.
Almost like gamifying it, aren't you?
A little bit of that, I also, I think that sport makes you lose quite a lot.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Like I look at my son, and he loses football games like every third game he loses.
Yeah.
Do you know? And you think he's getting used to losing and that being okay. The world doesn't end. He doesn't. Nothing massive happens. He lost, and okay, on to the next one.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether that's interesting. Whether you lean more in because you know that, hey, life is a collection of wins and losses.
It is, and I think like you said, if you're trying to like you're resting that downward spiral, it's like, what adjustment can I make to turn a loss into a draw?
Yeah.
And then from a draw to a win,
yeah.
and then a win to another win.
Yeah.
And I think when I run a football team, where I was a manager, I began to see football at a very different level from when I played. Because when you played, it's all about you.
Yeah.
And why am I coming off 10 minutes from time?
Yeah.
And I used to play in the wing,
Right.
and eventually I moved into the middle. When I played in the wing, it was almost like if you were being substituted, you knew it was one of the two wingers,
Right.
possibly one of the fullbacks, or maybe a striker. Never changed the centre backs,
No.
and you never changed centre midfield
Right.
or the goalkeeper. But when you're playing, you don't know that.
Yeah.
But then when you're managing, you go, oh, I don't want to upset this. So you naturally, and then you find yourself doing exactly what they were doing. And I was like, wow. And I think what me being a manager enabled me to do is take a lot of those principles of leadership and actively apply them.
Yeah.
Having that awkward conversation
Yeah.
about you're not playing this week, or having that awkward conversation about we're going to change tactics.
Yeah.
And understanding that you just got to point out the obvious.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. But and a lot of that was awkward conversations.
Well, it is.
And a lot of it is, and for me, I learned to live with awkward conversations because that's ultimately what it was.
Well, and I'm sure your experience after that first awkward conversation was, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
I can do another one of those.
Yeah.
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 And again, it's that sort of, okay.
And I think that's it. I think the leadership is, and why a lot of people that don't want to take leadership on it, is a series of awkward conversations on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I think and what I learned to manage is the aspect of energy.
Yeah.
As in the energy to have that awkward conversation. Doing it maybe 4:30 on a Friday afternoon is probably not the best time to have an awkward conversation, but maybe like a Tuesday at 10 o'clock is.
Yeah.
And so it's just understanding that, when I was running the football team, it was like, I learnt timing. I learnt that a manager used to do every game we played. The manager would walk around before the start of the game, reminding you of what happened the week before.
Right.
And then he would feed back, and he was very clever in the fact that when he used to walk around, he had just put one thing you did really well. So just before kickoff, you're like, yeah, I'm right. I'm up for this again.
Yeah.
Because you might have felt, oh, you didn't win, or you didn't score, or you didn't get an assist, and then it was he reminded you, yeah, but you know what? Took some amazing corners.
Yeah.
And it was just enough to
exactly
fire you up to go again.
Yeah.
And that was leadership. But it was a series of walking around the pitch, talking one-on-one conversations to just fire you up.
Well, and that's fascinating, isn't it? We, I love, again, going back to Covey, the kind of emotional bank account idea.
Yeah.
That everyone you've ever met, you've set up this kind of imaginary bank account.
Yeah.
And then every time you interact, you're either making a deposit or a withdrawal.
Yeah.
And that adds credit to the account, which means that when you do need to make a withdrawal, like with a challenging conversation, there's enough credit in the bank for you to survive that,
Yeah.
But it's tricky because it means that you've got to build that credit before you need to take some out.
And exactly, I remember we had a couple of cup finals. I remember we had a game in the midweek before, I think in both occasions. And it was like, your good news is you're playing, but then they would go, yeah, but I'm not playing in my own the cup final.
Right.
And you have to manage that. And they said,
yeah.
well, yeah, because of the collective,
Yeah.
you've got to think about the team. It's not all about you. And I remember one time I played a game of football, and it was a reserve game. And I was running the first team, we had the reserve team. And we were winning 1-0. Winning 1-0, and it was like, great. We had a guy in goal that wasn't necessarily, he was okay in goal, whatever, and he did fine, but he could also play up front.
Right.
And we were winning 1-0, and it was quite a tense game. Right. And the last 10 minutes, all we could hear was, I want to play out, I want to play out.
Really?
And I'm like, it's 1-0.
Yeah.
Just keep it quiet.
Yeah.
Don't change. We'll win the game. Anyway, the reserve team manager then because I had to like let him lead.
Right.
So the reserve team manager then relented. And I was like, oh. But I didn't want to overstep because
No, you've got to be
I'm the
careful.
first team manager. He's
Yeah.
running the reserves, let him do it. So he let him out. Anyway, he swapped the goalkeeper over, and the guy that went in goal wasn't that competent as a keeper. Anyway, 3 minutes from time, chips the keeper, didn't he? Oh,
No.
this 1-1. I'm livid. I'm
Yeah,
like
I
going,
bet you are.
you didn't focus for the benefit of the team.
Yeah.
Anyway, 90th minute, chips him again, 2-1. That's it. We blow whistle, we lose. And we hit the bar as well in the last minute. And we've lost 2-1.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm now a player, not a manager, and I'm just frustrated. I'm
Yeah.
like really angry, not happy. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm going, for the benefit of you running around up front that didn't score, by the way, it's cost the team a really good result.
Yeah.
Anyway, that person then was on the bench in the cup final I managed.
Right.
So he comes up to me, oh, can I get on? Can
Yeah.
I get on? And I literally went to him and said, it's too tense.
Yeah.
We're not doing it. And we won. We were 2-0 up. We conceded 10 minutes from the end. And I didn't bring him on.
Right.
And we won 2-1.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I remembered back then that actually, in that instance, it wasn't about the result for the team. It was about you getting on the pitch.
Yeah.
And it was just a leadership lesson I learned that I had to hold fort and say no. So out of the whole, I think we had 5 people on the bench. He didn't get the opportunity to come on.
Yeah.
He got a winner's medal. But it was like, no. It was like the benefit of the team was the most important thing.
Well, you've hit on something big there, I think, in that people, challenging conversations and bad news and all that is a lot more palatable if it comes with a why.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
That idea of, if you explain to people why you're doing things is so much more kind of, acceptable, I suppose.
So obviously you're now working with students, teachers, Cabot Learning Federation and people like that. What do you see next? Where you're at? How do you see?
I mean, I think, like most people, as you rise through, ranks of leadership, there's added benefits of a wider impact.
Yeah.
You go from, a class teacher to a team, your bigger impact to a whole school. And now I'm working across 35 schools.
Wow.
The impact is much, much bigger, which is exciting to feel, if you do the maths of how many students I possibly kind of interact. And a couple of colleagues that, work across in other parts of the country, we started like a trust network of people that have got similar roles.
Okay, great.
And there's now like 140 trusts with over like 1 million kids.
Wow.
Which is great.
Yeah.
But for me, there's something around, going back to what we talked about, that these leadership kind of principles that we've discovered and that we've kind of enhanced aren't education specific.
Yeah.
So for me now, it's about potentially trying to find a way to broaden my impact outside of education.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting to think that potentially there are all kinds of people that the stuff I've learned could be useful to. Not just in an education sense. So.
Well, I think the shift for you is it's not about titles or positions. It's about impact and influence. And I think the fact that you've gone from influence to classroom to school to an academies and now a trust and more people.
Yeah.
Naturally, then that's going to be speaking on stage more, I guess. Writing more books, I guess, and doing more of these like podcasts and stuff. In order to impact and influence people. And I think that's ultimately the thing that motivates me is that what I learn, I want to leave as much out there as possible.
Exactly.
So that the people following me don't have to start from ground zero. They can start from a 5 or a 10 and build on and upwards. And I think one of the things that, I'm doing, it's not a live experiment on our kids, but it can feel like that at times, is we're homeschooling our kids because I saw the system not producing what I thought would be competent, confident individuals and leaders. So our kids have been homeschooled and now we're seeing them sort of like, in life and whatever. Yeah. And naturally they lead. Yeah. Naturally they see adults as peers. And I'm like going, so what is missing in the education system that makes them see adults as this scary thing? Yeah. That they can't ask questions to. And so naturally I'm thinking, well, I've done this journey, I'm seeing where our kids are at now, but their aspirations are different. Like my middle son he wants to get into politics with the goal at some point becoming Prime Minister, which is a lofty goal. You think, how's that going to happen? Yeah, but I don't want to put the limitations on him and say, no, you can't do it.
No way.
I want to try and help him to get as far as he can on that particular journey, because I think that's unfortunately what we do. We go, no, sorry, you can't do that. Sorry, no, that's not for you.
Oh, exactly that. And it's funny you say that, because my son is 11, and I have the same thing. He comes to me with all kinds of crazy ideas, and I just fuel them.
That's it.
I just do the David Carter thing and go, you can do it, and I can help you. He only a couple of weeks ago, he said, I want to start a business. I said, right, what's the business? I don't know. I said, well, go away and come back, when you've got some ideas. He comes back, he says, I think it's going to be a clothing company.
Right.
I said, great, what are you going to call it? I don't know. I said, right, well, go away, come back. He comes back and he says, I'm still stuck on the name. And I said, well, usually when it comes to names, it's to do with like what your passion, what the values of the company are.
Yeah.
He said, I just want to make a load of money. And I said, okay. So we ended up settling on Stash as a name.
Okay.
And we changed the S to a $sign.
Yeah.
Stash. And but again, he then said, so what do we do? I said, well, we need a website. Yeah. So we bought a website, and we said, we need some stock. And so we bought 10 beanie hats.
Oh, there you go.
He sold them to his mates. He made a little bit of profit. But again, like, who knows what that little bit of belief will turn into.
It's nurturing that seed, isn't it? It's seeing that, like, that aptitude to be able to go for it and then just to elevate, like, whether it was naturally or whatever. It was like, I went out and washed cars. I needed money, so here's a bucket, got a sponge, and we just walk and knock on doors. And I think we've lost an element of that. Not to say like I have all the solutions, but I don't see too many children doing that. It's a case of that entrepreneurial thing needs to be actively encouraged, because I personally believe that entrepreneurship is a big solution to a lot of the tough problems out there. And whether it's politics, whether it's business, whatever, you need a body of entrepreneurs willing to do the crazy and lead.
Of course you do.
And you inputting into your son, and me inputting into my son. I mean, it's funny. We were joking. I was in America, and I told the story about my son, and the guy opposite me goes, "Well, my son wants to be the president of the state," and I was like, "So our relationship? Can you imagine that?
Can you imagine it?"
But the craziness is it's those little things, those little choices, those little conversations could go anywhere. And you often talk about people that are in successful places, and they go, we're having a conversation one day, and a series of ordinary decisions on a normal day ultimately can make spectacular things
we
happen.
were talking about this before, this idea. I've got another book coming out with Routledge in July. And in the book, I talk about this thing called a self-efficacy circle.
Okay.
So this idea of almost like an imaginary circle around you, where the things that you're confident to do sit inside, and the things you're not confident to do sit outside. Yeah. And the further outside they are, the further you would never even think you could do it. Yeah. And when I reflected back after thinking about that, about how tight my circle was when I was 16, there was almost everything was outside the circle. Going on a plane, anything like that, completely outside. But the idea is that either by circumstance or by choice, if you reach outside the circle and then are successful, the circle then grows to encapsulate that. So for me, going abroad was outside the circle. I go abroad and it's inside the circle. Going solo traveling to Miami, that's outside the circle. Suddenly I do it, it's inside the circle. And I wonder whether my son, your son is included, has a lot more stuff inside their circle than we did when we were kids.
And I think for me, what I would say to that is that their circle will become bigger, start bigger than where our circle was.
I think it would.
But ultimately, for them to keep growing is to step outside of that circle. But essentially, it's that thing that was written on the £2 coin, standing on the shoulder of giants, because ultimately that's what we want. And we want our kids to not start from ground zeros, to build upon where we find ourselves. And listen, I might not be the world's most successful entrepreneur, I'm not Elon Musk or whatever, but if I can inspire my children to believe for a little bit more than what was dictated to them by society, so be it. But as long as they go beyond me, That's my primary concern.
Yeah.
Not to compete with me, go beyond me.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what I want to see.
I tell my boy, you're a version 2.0.
There you go.
You know what I mean? You need to be bigger and better, but hey, I'm going to push you. I'm not going to make it easy.
So how would people get in contact with you, Chris? How reach out and connect?
I'm on LinkedIn and things like that, which is great. I've got a website, which we can put the link in.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the Launchpad is that I'm kind of using the Substack site to publish like a free Launchpad every week.
Oh, nice.
So you can sign up to the newsletter and you get one popped into your email. Obviously buy the book.
So the book is Leadership Launchpads.
Leadership Launchpads.
By Chris Baker.
Chris Baker, yeah.
And website is?
Yeah, so Dr. Chris WB at substack.com.
Okay.
You can get on there. There's all kinds of things, resources and stuff like that.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, great.
I could talk for another hour.
Yeah, we could just keep going.
No problem.
Yeah.
So on that basis, we're definitely going to get you back. But thanks so much for your time and chatting about leadership. I love it. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Purpose People podcast. How you can help us is to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. You can also subscribe to our podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google and Amazon. That helps us get our message out there to help people go after their dreams, double down on it and be successful in life on their terms.